Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Rush with AOPA. I am the Director of the Project Management Office here at AOPA and also a member of the Flight Planning Products team. And also welcome to our first YouTube live stream here for AOPA. This is a new format we're trying out. If any of you have attended our webcast or webinars that we've had in the past, we've read feedback and we get comments from people about, hey, geez, can we do more with that? Can we improve the audio quality? There were some problems with some scratchy audio and hard to hear. So we've looked around for some solutions, and this is one we're trying out with YouTube live streaming. This is very popular now, especially in 2016. So we hope that you're going to find that this is a more engaging and certainly a more interactive medium for us here. Certainly we're using different equipment. You see the first thing that's different is you're looking at a webcam right now. We can do a lot more with YouTube live streaming than we could with the webcast software. The webcast software was great for what it was. It was a legacy. It's a pretty old piece of software, pretty old piece of technology. But we're moving into the next era, if you will, and we're going to have a much bigger presence on YouTube moving forward. So we want to welcome and thank everyone here tonight, and also a couple shameless plugs. If you see that subscribe button down below the video there, that's the easiest way to get notified when we are live and when we are doing different events. We're going to be communicating a lot more through YouTube, so that you can do yourself a favor, click that subscribe button, and you'll be more engaged with what we're doing here on YouTube in the live streaming world. So tonight we are going to be taking a look at some of the enhancements and some of the more popular features of the AOPA Flight Planner. We've had a Flight Planner around for a long time. We've been doing a lot to enhance it, a lot to improve some of the features. We've done a lot to make it integrated with EFB apps. We recognize that EFB apps are extremely popular in the market. I've been an EFB user since day one, certainly wouldn't fly without it. But having a desktop-based flight planner with some really unique features and being able to connect that to an EFB is sort of the best of both worlds going forward. So tonight we're going to take a look at some of the more 4 or 5 of the most popular features, and these are features in the Flight Planner that you're not going to find in a lot of different products. In some of them you're not going to find in any products out there, EFB or otherwise. These are really catered to the planning world, to that pre-planning a day or two or a week before you're getting ready to take a flight. Do all this pre-planning, find your best departure time, find where your fuel stop or your intermediate stop is going to be, and then be able to send that flight over to an EFB when it's time to go out flying. So we're going to take a look at how all that works together. And towards the end of this, it's going to run about 45, maybe 50 minutes. We'll have plenty of time at the end for some questions and answers. We are scheduled through 9 o'clock Eastern time. But we know we got people from all over the country joining us tonight. So at the end of this, we are going to take a look at some new development that we're working on. In the past, we have not done, kind of shown development in the public before it was ready to actually go into production. We're taking a different stance on that, and we're actually going to show our members now preview of some of the technology, some of the new features we're working on. And then we're also going to show you how early in 2017, you're going to be able to participate more closely with that development. And that is going to allow you to have access to a beta version of our Flight Planner, which you'll be able to test some of the new stuff we're working on and give us feedback and help direct us and guide things and give us information that maybe we hadn't thought about. So we'll be showing you how you can get more involved with that, what forums we're using, and how that all is going to work. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But first, let's get in here and we're going to get started and take a look at some of the top features that we have in the AOPA Flight Planner. So just as a reminder, the AOPA Flight Planner, or the flight planning products, really makes up a family of 4 different products. So we have, of course, the AOPA Flight Planner. That's a web-based application. It runs on Macintosh, PCs, Linux boxes if you have them, whatever. You can even run it on tablet devices. iPads, Android devices can run it. It is designed more for a desktop PC, a larger screen, and a traditional keyboard and mouse. But we have plenty of members that are using it on an iPad. So that's the AOPA Flight Planner, and that's what we'll be spending the majority of our time tonight actually looking at. The AOPA Airports Directory, another one of the family of products that we have. That is one of the top 3 most visited web pages on the AOPA.org website. Very popular, a lot of content, and we're going to be adding to that next year. You'll actually see some changes coming to the AOPA Airports Directory, and we'll probably preview some of that stuff later in the year as we get into it. AOPA Weather, another very popular legacy product. We have a lot of weather information, a lot of different charts out there, aviation-specific charts that you would expect. And of course, AOPA Go, which is our mobile app, which is really the AOPA Airport Directory and the AOPA Weather product on your device. So it's designed to work on a mobile device, whether it be a phone or a tablet, and it does support Android as well as iOS devices. It's a free, all of these are free member products, by the way. So there is no charge, there's no additional. As long as you're an AOPA member, you will have access to all of these as part of your base membership. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about the base features and then we'll get in. We've got a lot to cover tonight. We will do some questions and answers later, so if you want to enter those into the chat, if you have questions that we haven't covered, you may want to wait till we get a little bit closer to the end. One little thing, little caveat about the way the chat works with YouTube is it does require you to have either be logged in with your Google account or your YouTube account to be able to post comments. You don't have to be logged in or even have an account to watch the content. Anybody can watch that, but if you do want to participate and make comments, you do have to be logged in. So that's a YouTube thing, not really an AOPA thing. Okay, so some of the base features of the AOPA Flight Planner. And these are just the things that are in the base. We're not going to review all these, but just some of the things just for people who may not have used the product in the past. It is online browser based, as I said earlier, so it runs in Chrome or Internet Explorer or Firefox or any popular browser that you may be using. And there's nothing to install, by the way. It just runs inside of a browser. It uses interactive vector-based charts or base maps. So everything on the map, you can click on it and get information about it. We have customizable overlays. These are very popular. You can really take a VFR style chart or an IFR style chart, and you can make them look any way you want them. You can add different elements and different overlays to them, and you can save those so that they open up next time. The drag and drop interface, this allows you to rubber band. You can actually move different things around. You can drag and drop your route, really anything that you need to do, just like you would expect to do in an EFB app or any other app for that. Route briefing and file should go without saying. You can do a route briefing and you can file a flight plan. It does support ICAO flight plans, and that is something we're going to look at a little bit later in this presentation. And we're also going to be looking at the new style route briefing. This is what we call the next gen briefing. So we're going to get into that one a little bit later too. Color-coded METAR and TAF overlays. You see this feature in a lot of different flight planning products out there. So the feature demonstrations, these are the things we're actually going to be looking at and talking a little bit more in detail and demonstrating. We can actually do a live demonstration with YouTube now in our live format, so we don't have to show canned presentation or just static images like we had to in the past. We can now actually show live demonstrations. So these are the ones we're going to demonstrate. Route line fuel warnings. Weather along route, a very popular feature we introduced at Oshkosh last year in 2016. Fuel along route, and that works very well with the airports along route filters, another unique feature that the AOPA Flight Planner has. We're going to look at how it integrates with several, there's actually 5 different EFB apps that the AOPA Flight Planner is currently integrated with. In AOPA Go, I always leave that out, but AOPA Go is integrated with these EFB apps as well. And we're not going to demonstrate that, but it's pretty straightforward. And then finally, as I said earlier, the next gen style briefing. This is a graphical briefing. I think you'll find that getting a briefing has never been easier, perhaps fun. You can actually use a chart to navigate around a briefing. And this really comes from the integration that we've been working on with Leidos Flight Service. That will come out here early in 2017. And of course, ICAO filing. We'll spend a little bit of time looking at how you configure your aircraft equipment with all the different ICAO codes and things like that. If any of you were around and watched the Leidos Flight Service webinar that we had about a month ago now, Joe Danelli was on there with Ferdy from our PIC, and they looked at the Leidos, how you would actually use their pilot web to do an ICAO flight plan. You can actually do all of that through the AOPA Flight Planner, and it'll still send it over to your Leidos Flight Service account. So you can use either tool to actually file a flight plan. Okay, so let's get in now, and we'll take a look at the first feature that we'll talk about. These are the route line fuel warnings. Now these are color-coded. We basically color code the route line based on your fuel reserves. So what does that mean? based on your aircraft performance profile. So the fuel you use during burn, the fuel that is burned during climb, cruise, and descent is all calculated in the nav log. And we get all these detailed information about how much fuel is going to be used, how long each leg is. We use all that information and we combine it with the current winds aloft detail, the effects that the winds aloft have on our aircraft. And all of that goes into color coding the route line based on two different categories. We have a yellow zone, which represents the area of your flight. If you're doing a long cross-country flight, where you'll have 90 minutes of fuel to an area where you'll have 60 minutes of fuel. So that little block of the route will be color-coded yellow. Whenever you have less than 60 minutes of fuel, that part of the route line will be colored red. Okay, so that's kind of what we call the red zone. You probably want to be stopping for fuel before you get into that. So now I'm going to switch back over to the flight planner here, and we'll take a look at exactly how that works in practice. So I've got a route loaded here in the AOPA Flight Planner. This is a route from Frederick, Maryland. We're going to be using this route kind of all night here. We've going from Frederick, Maryland to Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And right now you see it with just the magenta line like we would typically see in any other app that's out there. If you look over on the left side, up near the top, there's a little checkbox called Show Fuel Warnings. Now, by default, this is on, so you don't even have to worry about turning this on or turning it off. We actually turn it on by default whenever you start a new Flight Planner session. I have it turned off tonight for demonstration purposes just to kind of show how all this is going to work. So take a look at the route line, and now we'll actually turn on fuel warnings. So now you can see there's those two different color-coded areas. We've got the yellow zone, which remember is from 90 minutes to 60 minutes of fuel, and then we've got the red zone, which is less than 60 minutes of fuel. That is highly accurate based on the fuel burns and calculations that you have entered in your aircraft profile, as well as the effects that winds aloft are going to have at your altitude. And for this flight, we actually had this set to 6,000 feet. So if we took off Frederick, Maryland, we could expect somewhere around this area in the yellow line here, we're going to have about 90 minutes, and we'll end up with 60 minutes where this transitions from yellow to red. So this is very helpful for actually going in and determining where you were going to need a fuel stop. All the guesswork is taken out of this now. I know this was always an issue. You're looking at it, it's like, well, where am I going to plan a fuel stop? Where exactly? And you're trying to figure all this out. This is just in yellow and red instead of black and white, right on the screen. You know that you want to be stopping in the yellow area or before. Why 60 minutes? Why did we set it at 60 minutes? We actually followed the Air Safety Institute, the AOPA's Air Safety Institute recommendation for fuel reserves, and that is at 60 minutes. Day VFR flight, we know, is 30 minutes, but we double that just as a safety precaution. And I know that's what I fly by, and that's why we decided to go ahead and line those calculations to that. Okay, so that's the route line fuel warnings. Very helpful feature. Remember, it's turned on by default. You don't need to actually do anything. Plan your flight. If you don't see the colors on your route line whenever you plan along cross country, then more than likely you don't need a fuel stop. You can always double check over here just to make sure that it is turned on, but then you can feel at least safe that you're going to have plenty of fuel to complete that flight. All right, so let's hop back here to the presentation. Take a look at the next feature. This is my favorite one, weather along route. Weather along route, we thought about that actually. In fact, just off camera, I have Vance Whitehouse with me. He is one of our developers that works in the flight planning. He is my technical producer tonight, and I really appreciate. We had a couple little technical issues going into the night, but we got them all worked out. Hopefully, you're seeing a good quality stream and everything's working out right. But the weather along route, Vance and I, were actually at Sun and Fun this year. And we kind of looked at a lot of members coming into the AOPA tent using our kiosk. We actually have computers set up at Sun and Fun and Oshkosh, all the fly-ins, that allow members to come in and plan flights or check the weather before they depart if they're flying out, basically have access to the internet and use whatever flight planning tools they want. It'd be great if they're using ours, but we don't really care. We just want people to have safe flights. And we were reserving, we were talking about it later that night at dinner, that all these people were checking all these terminal area forecasts. And the traditional way you do that is you type in 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 different airports along a route, and you get this big long text list of terminal area forecast. And then you kind of weed through all that and look and see what the forecast is going to be for a flight. And when we get to these bigger shows, it's not unusual for people to be flying long distances. So they're looking at a much larger path. So out of that, we sort of invented this weather along route. And we looked at it and said, well, geez, there's got to be a way to make this graphical, which is what we did. The weather along route, I think you're going to find extremely unique. It's a complete new way to look at a terminal area forecast. And we're going to spend a little bit more time on this because it deserves it during the actual demo. So what is it? Color-coded weather conditions along your route based on the terminal area forecast. So in itself, that doesn't sound, oh, geez, okay, color-coded, we see that all the time. Here's the big difference. The condition colors are set based on the passing time for each one of the stations along your route. So again, kind of like that fuel along route, we calculate where your aircraft is going to be at any given moment, and then we find for each weather reporting station, we pull the weather TAF that is issued that's going to be active for the time you are passing through there, given a departure of whatever, 8 o'clock in the morning. So we'll actually demonstrate, this demonstrates it a lot easier than it does looking at it. We have an adjustable corridor that goes from 50 nautical miles out to 150 nautical miles. So we allow you to adjust the width of how wide, how far off your route do you want to look and pull weather stations to evaluate and include in your decision making. A very, very quick departure time slider control. And this is really the key that makes this whole tool work. This is what allows you to evaluate the best departure time very easily by using your mouse to drag a departure time slider just back and forth to say, well, what happens if I leave earlier? What happens if I leave later? It allows you to play that what if scenario, and then instantly on the chart will update the weather conditions so you can see where your best departure time is going to be. Each one of the weather stations allows you to hover your mouse over it and get what we call a quick pop-up, and that's a timeline. And the timeline, again, is another unique feature of the Weather Along Route tool that allows you to look at the terminal area forecast in a progressive timeline, and we're going to look at that one too. Of course, then we also have a detailed weather conditions pop-up, so if you really want to drill into a particular station, you can certainly do that and kind of look at all the details about it. And finally, we color code what we call hazards, weather hazards. So these are significant weather or different hazardous weather conditions that may be existing in the terminal area forecast. But rather than just getting buried in the text where it's kind of hard to pick that out or you may easily overlook it, we color it in the text and even on the timeline. We'll color code it either red or orange based on the severity of that weather condition. And where this plays a big part is, especially like if you think in the summertime, it's quite possible to have VFR conditions in a terminal area forecast where it'll say, yes, the conditions are VFR, yet we can have thunderstorms in the terminal area or in the vicinity. That's quite common, especially here in the Northeast. We get that all the time. So it's not just good enough as we were building this tool to look and say, yes, everything is VFR. We knew we had to come up with and figure out how to put a hazard advisor in there so at least you know that, yes, it's VFR, but you can expect thunderstorms in that area. And we'll take a look and see how that works right now. So let's switch over to the flight planner. And we're going to go ahead and use our same route here. I'm actually going to shut off the fuel warnings just to make this demonstrate a little bit easier. Over on the right side toolbar, you're going to see a host of different tools that we have. The very bottom one, it's a cloud with a little airplane flying over it. That is our Weather Along Route tool. So we're going to look at the entire route. We're going to take the fuel stop out of this and just look at the entire route as one big piece here. So I go ahead and turn this tool on, and you'll see that it's now put a shaded corridor over our route. And within that shaded corridor, we've got all the different weather reporting stations in a color code. Green is VFR, blue would be marginal VFR, red will be IFR, and magenta, which we're not seeing any on here at the screen at this moment, but that would be low IFR conditions. This is based on, if you look at the little control panel that's opened up here, this is based on a departure time of 9:30 p.m. So it's basically looked and picked up basically an hour prior from, ahead of what we are right now. Now, we probably wouldn't leave on a night trip like this. So this is the departure time slider that I mentioned earlier. So if we want to look at this and say, well, geez, what's this going to look like tomorrow, let's say at 6 a.m. So we can just simply drag this out, and you'll see as I increase the time here that the weather conditions are changing. Okay, so if we set this at 6 o'clock and we were going to leave Frederick, Maryland, you could see that we could expect VFR conditions over the entire route of flight the whole way out to Oshkosh. Okay, so it looks really good at 6 a.m. in the morning. We start to see some of these little hazard advisors. So you see how some of these icons, especially let's look at these 3 blue ones down here. Those are marginal VFR conditions, so they are forecasting, and you can see there's a little time label under each one of those. So if we left at 6 a.m., we could see that out around where those blue ones are, we're talking around 9:40 to 9:56 a.m., what time we would be passing by those stations. And we can see that they are calling for marginal VFR conditions. Now that's a good bit. That's probably about 40 miles off of our route. So, I would probably not really evaluate that too much. But you can see how, in addition to having the color code, they also have a warning label on those. So they have that little exclamation mark on those icons. That is the hazard advisor. That is our first alert that says it's marginal VFR, but there's something else going on there which begs us to investigate a little bit deeper. So if we actually hover over one of these icons, we'll actually get a little pop-up. This is that little tooltip pop-up we talked about. And this is the first look we can see at the actual timeline. There's 2 different timelines on here. The top one you can see is blue for 1, 2, 3 different forecast periods, and then it ends up being IFR later in the day. And we actually put the actual time that TAF is going to become active. So what you're looking at is a timeline, a linear progression of terminal area forecast. Each dot on that timeline represents the issuance of a new terminal area forecast. So you can see that one is starting at 19 p.m., the next one is issued at 11 p.m., the next one at 7 a.m., and then not again until 4 p.m. So we can see that there's also that little vertical dashed line with a little arrow that's about 2/3 of the way into that flight, and that is basically what we call our crossing time. So for that station we actually hovered over, it tells us that we are going to cross by that at 9:40 in the morning, and we can expect blue or marginal VFR conditions, but then we see the hazards is red underneath that. Now it doesn't tell us any more about that at this point, so that's where we're going to want to look in a little bit deeper and see what does the red mean? What are the hazardous conditions that are forecast for that period? So to dig in deeper, all we have to do is actually click on the icon. Okay, so I haven't done anything. We hovered over it, we got the quick tooltip, then I click on it to get into the actual details of that station. So now we can actually get more information about it. We're looking at the same information, but it's in a little bit more of a, kind of what we call our field, football field here. We've got these different lines representing different times instead of yardage. But here again is this vertical crossing time. So we're passing through or by this station at 9:40 in the morning. We can expect marginal conditions. If I hover my mouse over the blue line, it gives me a little pop-up and says, yes, it's going to be marginal, ceiling of 2,500 AGL, and 3 miles visibility. But now if we actually go down and look at the red section, it says light snow showers. That is the hazard advisor. That is the significant weather or weather that really may not change what the forecast is. It doesn't alter the being marginal VFR, but it does contribute to the weather, which is something we want to learn about. So you can see that this whole block, which it has the dashed white outline here, and it's in the sort of the darker blue color, that is the TAF that will be active at 9:40 in the morning. And if we look down below, you can see that there's a corresponding block that's in the same color with the same dashed white outline. That is the actual terminal area forecast details for that period. So we can see on the 16th at 7 a.m., that's when the TAF was issued. Our crossing time will be 9:40, so we're going to be about 1/3 of the way into that terminal area forecast period by looking just at the horizontal or the vertical marker here. Our visibility is 3 miles. Winds are going to be 190 at 6 knots, overcast at 2,500 with light snow showers. Okay, so we can make a determination on that, whether that is within our go, no-go decision and within whether we're willing to fly in, keeping in mind that it's about 40, maybe even 50 miles off of our route. Okay, so that's the other contributing factor that we want to look at. If we look at one that's more close to our route, let's look at this one. This also has a crossing time of 9:40. And we can see that the weather conditions are supposed to be VFR, ceiling 10,000 AGL, and 6 miles. So we can very easily see and start to visualize where the weather is along our route of flight. Okay, so that's the way this works. You just simply hover those to get the quick pop-up, click on it to get into the details. When you're in the details, you can look, and the reason we kind of did this linear fashion is it represents a timeline or a trend. I like to look at trends. A lot of times if I can see what the TAF was earlier in the day and what it's going to end up later in the day, you can generally determine if the conditions are getting better or getting worse later in the day. Okay, so this allows you to look at each one of those simply by pointing your mouse to the period. It will highlight the corresponding details block down below, and you can see what's predicted to be. So again, a visual way, a completely new way to look at terminal area forecast. Might take you a little bit of playing around to get used to it. Once you understand and you get used to how this works, I think you'll really, really like it. We get a lot of feedback all the time from people using this tool that just, congratulate us on figuring a way to look at TAFs in a visual fashion. So one thing I want to look at, this departure time slider before we conclude, is 6 a.m. Well, what if we decided that, well, let's wait a little bit later in the day. Maybe we don't want to get up so early, we're going to wait later. So all we have to do is take our departure time slider and start dragging it around. Well, right here is now 11 a.m. So that's 5 hours later, and we can see that the weather has significantly changed to IFR and even low IFR conditions out towards the end of our flight. So we can see that the conditions are going to go deteriorate the later we wait. So if we want to get to Oshkosh on this day, we probably want to be leaving early in the morning in order to be able to complete the flight. So just to reiterate, when you're looking at these different times and the forecast for each one of these, you're not looking at what, and this is the confusing part sometimes, you're not looking at what the terminal area forecast is for the current time. You're looking at what is predicted to be when you're in that area. So I like to say it's like looking into the future all along your route. And the time labels underneath each one of these tells you, kind of shows you that we're starting at 5 in the morning, we're ending up somewhere around 11:15 by the time we would land. Okay, and again, that is tied directly to the performance of your aircraft. It does include winds aloft in those calculations, so it's doing the same thing that the fuel along route was doing, giving us a highly detailed marker along the route. Okay, so pretty cool tool. Give it a try. I think you'll actually like that. So let's look at the next one that kind of lends itself. We're going to use the same route. This is the airport and fuel along route. Again, this is a very unique, not the fuel prices along route, we can pretty much get that in any app that's out there. That's not that unusual. EFBs all have that, and it's a great handy tool. We've taken a little bit different spin on that to try to make it even more useful. One of the reasons that we're looking at fuel prices is to determine where we want to stop. And that's one of the reasons I look at it. However, I've got different criteria. I've got additional criteria that just because they have the cheapest fuel, I'd like to, have a couple other things. It'd be great if they had an FBO. It'd be great if they had maybe a courtesy car. It'd be even fantastic if they had a restaurant on the field. So in other apps, there's no way to actually look at that or filter out airports. And that's exactly what this one does, and we'll show that. So again, color-coded fuel prices along your route corridor. User selectable corridor width. Just like our other tools, you can define how wide or how narrow you want your corridor based on your willingness to fly off of that route. You can toggle between 100 low lead and Jet A fuel prices. You can use the airport filters for selecting services and amenities at all the different airports that meet your criteria. And the prices along with the filters allows us to really pick that perfect stop where we want to go, okay, or at least know what's in the area before we start planning our flight. So let's toggle back to the flight planner. We're going to use our same route now, heading out to Oshkosh. Now this works with the fuel warnings enabled, makes this tool even better, because now we know the area of our route where optimally we want to stop. So we want to be somewhere in the yellow area or before. So if we use our zoom tool, and I'm going to zoom in on this area just so we can take a little bit closer look. I'll zoom out just a little bit here. So now let's go ahead and turn on the fuel and airport filters. So the icon over on the right that's just above the weather along route filter or overlay, turn that one on. This is our fuel prices in airports filter. Now let me go in and just reset my filters here real quick, and we'll revisit this just in a second. So now we can see the flight planner has displayed a list of all the fuel prices along our route within a corridor. I currently have my corridor set to 35 miles. So that is 35 miles from the center line of my route to the edge. So overall, this is a 70-mile wide corridor on both sides. So I can see all the color-coded fuel prices. The prices go from a darker green being the lowest prices to the oranges and the reds, which are going to be the highest prices, okay? So we're going to be looking somewhere in this area on our chart is really where we're going to be looking to find a fuel stop. So we're looking at fuel prices. Now this is where I would want to, and this is 100 low lead. This is where you would change from Jet A to 100 low lead prices. Boy, I guess they are a lot, less expensive for Jet A if you're lucky enough to be flying something that burns Jet A, but I guess you pay for it on the other end. So now let's add the filters. So below this, you'll see a little drop down. We can expand this. Let me move this over here a little bit, get it out of my picture. Oh, we don't even have the picture on, so that's good. There, we put it on. So now we can see that public use is already checked for us. That is defaulted on. You can turn that off if you want. But now start to look closely at the different fuel prices as I start to enable a couple of these other filters. One you'll see is a landing fee. So let's click that one, and you can see 3 or 4 disappear. They charge a landing fee. Okay, so I don't like to pay landing fees any more than the next guy, so I can turn that one off. I'm an IFR pilot. I fly a fair amount of IFR, so I always like to have at least an RNAV approach. My plane is equipped with a GPS that can fly RNAVs with LPV. So if I can find at least an RNAV approach, I'm going to be happy. Most of the time, they'll have an ILS if they have RNAV. Not all the time, but at least an RNAV, and I'll be good. I'd like to have an FBO, would be great. And then here's the bigger one. So all these are still in the running based on our criteria here. But now let's look and see how many of these actually have a restaurant in the field. And we can see that drops a lot of them out, as we can expect. Unfortunately, there's not as many restaurants around as there used to be. So as restaurant in the field, geez, we're the whole way back to here if we wanted to stop to actually find a restaurant on the field. We certainly can't make it out to these. We don't have enough fuel. We're going to have to stop before that. But we do have another option, that is, let's look at restaurants nearby. Okay, so this is within a mile. So this is what we consider, it's walkable at worst. But if they had a courtesy car, that would even be better. Okay, so we can actually enable the courtesy car with restaurants nearby. Now we find a couple options. And there's one right here at the end that has the cheapest fuel price. So let's go take a look at that one. We'll move this out of the way. Let's bring this to the bottom. So we'll zoom on this one. It's right at the end of our yellow. It's Craig, or I think that's Craig. It might not be. It's Fulton County, I'm sorry. It's Fulton County Airport. So we can see that. We see the fuel price is $3.78 for 100 low lead. If we wanted to get more information about this, we could always click on this title up here. That'll open the AOPA Airports directory, and we can get all the information about that airport. If you want to download a kneeboard format to take with you, you click on this. It'll open a PDF that'll have all the frequencies, all the information we have that you would want to keep on a kneeboard and print out. That's available right there by clicking on that. So if this is the airport, we decide that, geez, they've got a courtesy car, there's a restaurant that's nearby we can get to, let's make that our fuel stop. All that we would do is take our route, we'll drag using the rubber band feature, we would drop it on Fulton County, our route will update, and now we've added that as a stop. Now, currently, we're working on a tool that's going to enhance this and make this easier to actually divide this up into 2 separate flight plans. I wish I could show you. We're just not quite along development far enough on that feature, but it is something we're working on. Those of you who have requested that feature, that is the #1 requested feature in our user forum that for our feedback tool, our user feedback tool. So you heard it here first. It is in development. We are working on it. It's complicated, but we feel pretty positive that we'll be able to deliver that at some point early next year, maybe mid next year. It depends on how it goes. It's coming. Right now, you drag it over there. You would want to manually create this and make this into 2 different routes. Okay, so you would do that working over on the left. Since here is Fulton County, we could simply select all of the waypoints in the airport below that, use the icon up here to remove those. That will then give us what I call leg 1 from Frederick to Fulton County. I would then simply do a new flight plan from KRCR to OSH, do the same thing, and then create a leg 2. And right now, so it's a little manual. It takes an extra 20 seconds to do to set up another flight. But you would have 2 flight plans, then you could file separately. But again, we are working on automating that and making that a little bit easier. So expect that coming in the future. It's your first little Easter egg for the night. Okay, so let's zoom back out here. That is our airports and fuel along route. Very helpful feature. Give that one a try, especially on your longer cross countries. Okay, the EFB app integration and our emailing and nav log. These go hand in hand. This is another very popular feature that we've introduced, and we've been adding EFB apps to this. And the newest one we just got added literally about 3 weeks ago is Garmin Pilot on iOS. So if you're an iOS user of Garmin Pilot, you can now take advantage of this feature. We've had some people ask, well, what about Garmin Pilot for Android? They are working on that. We actually tested a version of Garmin Pilot on Android, and we had mixed, it worked on some devices, didn't work the best on other devices. We gave some feedback to Garmin. They are working on a couple tweaks and adjustments to that, and they do fully expect to have Garmin Pilot on Android supported for the same functionality. So I don't have a timeline on that. That's really up to Garmin, but I can tell you that we tested it. We were able to get it to work. There's just a couple little tweaks, and I'm sure they'll have it worked out here a few weeks or so. Okay, so EFB app integration. The way this works is you would use the AOPA Flight Planner to plan your flight. So let's say we did that one to Fulton County. So we have our flight, leg 1, and we have leg 2. Using the flight planner, you can send a nav log, the AOPA navigation log. You can send that to any email address you want. So the idea is you would send it to an email that you can open up on your EFB or your iPad or your Android device where you would have your EFB installed. Okay. Once you have that, there are buttons in that email, right in that nav log. When you open that email up, you're going to see some buttons across the top, and we are going to demonstrate this, that will allow you to send that route to any of our supported EFBs. Currently, we support ForeFlight Mobile, Garmin Pilot, Navigator, which is also an Android-based EFB, the Seattle Avionics version of FlyQ EFB, and WingX Pro 7. There are, I won't say, but I know there are 2 more in the works, and that should make a lot of people happy. They've been commonly requested. We have been in talks with them, but we don't announce those until they get a little bit further into development and let them do the announcement first, because it is a lot of development on the EFB developer side. We aid in that, but it is really their thing. So there are 2 more that are in the works that we'll be adding to this list probably early next year. So expect some announcements on that as we get a little bit further down the road. There are direct integrations. Both Navigator and WingX Pro 7 have done what we call a direct integration. That allows you to actually access your list of saved routes in the AOPA Flight Planner from directly within the EFB without having to do this emailing yourself a nav log. And we will show how that works using WingX Pro as an actual demo. Okay. So here we are back in the flight planner, and we've got that route from Frederick to Fulton County. Okay, so that's the same one where we amended, we changed our flight, and we have that one in there now. Down in the lower left, at the bottom of the what we call the route window, you'll see a button that says email. Okay, so if you click on email, that will open up a little email route window. Okay, and that here you will actually put in your email address. This is the email address that you can send to yourself so you can open this up on your iPad or Android. You can also send the same route. If you're flying with a friend or you're flying with a buddy, you can also send this nav log to them so that they could open it up in their route or their iPad or their EFB as well. Even if they were using a different EFB. If you were using ForeFlight and your buddy was using WingX, you could email each the same nav log and you'll be opening up the same exact route in 2 different products. So pretty cool little feature. Okay, so I send myself the nav log. And on my device, on my iPad, I opened it up, and this is what I see. I open the email up, and I see a traditional nav log that you would expect. All your information is there. It's a great little backup nav log. Even if you're using an EFB, it's a handy little tool to or a handy little piece of information to have. And at the top, you'll see 4 little buttons: ForeFlight, Garmin, FlyQ, and WingX Pro 7. So depending on which EFB you're using, you would simply click on the appropriate button. So we'll pretend we're clicking on ForeFlight here. We click on ForeFlight. ForeFlight would launch on your iPad, and that route, the same exact route we had in the flight plan, will be loaded into ForeFlight. Now that it's in ForeFlight, this works exactly like any route you would manually created in ForeFlight. There's no difference. You can still modify it, you can change it, you can file it, you can brief it. If you could do it in ForeFlight, it's exactly the same kind of route that ForeFlight would create. There's absolutely no difference whatsoever. Okay, so that's an example of how sending a route using the email will work. So now let's look at a direct integration. And this is how Navigator and both WingX Pro have done it. Now I've used WingX Pro just because I was using an iPad, so I actually used that one for this demonstration. But it's very, very similar on Navigator. So in WingX Pro 7, you would open this up and you would have your map screen. And in the lower, if you click on the Info tab down here, down in the lower left, you'll see a button. It's called Import. You click on Import. That will open up the little import dialog, and it'll probably default to Flight Share, but you can simply click on the AOPA tab. When you click on that, it's going to ask you for your AOPA username and your AOPA password. Okay? These are the same credentials that you use to log into our website. So you click on those, or enter that information, and then there's a button over on the right that says Get Route List from AOPA. You click that button. It will take just a second. It'll connect to the AOPA servers, and then you'll see a list of all of your saved routes. Okay, so you can see there's that one, KFDK to KRCR. That's the same one we were looking at that we just built. That's our first leg going to Oshkosh. So if I want to open that one, I would simply click on it, and now WingX will then load that route with all the same exact waypoints into WingX. And again, just like when we loaded into ForeFlight, you can now interact with this and manipulate this route using all the great tools and features that WingX has. It is just a route just like any other route would be. Okay, so that's the way the EFB integrations work. So now let's take a look at some of the next gen. This is some of the cool stuff. Those are the top features that exist in the AOPA Flight Planner today. You can use every one of those features we just showed. Now we're going to get into looking at the next gen style briefing in the ICAO flight plan. And I'm actually going to take this out of order. I'm going to do the ICAO side first because that sets us up for the next gen style briefing. The next gen style briefing, as we get into that, that is not currently in the app. We are going to be looking at a beta version of this. You can expect to see that sometime early Q1 next year. We'll finish that out and release it, and we'll of course put tutorials and all kinds of things behind that. So this is your early glimpse at some early development work. We would love to get feedback from you in the comments. There is going to be a survey probably sent out. Many of you may get, if you pre-registered for the live stream, you'll get a survey, and we would really love to have you fill out the survey and give us comments on not only the content of what we're showing, but also on this new environment, this new method of YouTube streaming and how that's working. How is the audio? How is the video? Any suggestions? We'd love to hear that, and we will change things that we need to based on the feedback. So let's take a look at these. The next gen style briefing and ICAO flight plan are both made possible through the integration we have been working on for several months now with Leidos Flight Service, formerly Lockheed Martin Flight Service. So we are building that integration. You will be able to file and brief through Leidos once this is released. We are still going to have CSRA DUATS around, so you'll still be able to use that as a legacy briefing. And we're actually enhancing that legacy briefing a little bit to make it a little bit easier to use. So we'll take a look at that. But the Leidos, when we get into this next gen style, we get a lot more information back from this next gen briefing than we did from the legacy, the older style briefings. And that allows us to build a graphically oriented, sort of an interactive briefing for our route. And this allows you to look at a chart and click on objects on the chart to navigate through the briefing. So it's pretty cool, and we'll demonstrate this here in a second. All the different sections, NOTAMs, adverse conditions, weather, forecast conditions, all of those are in collapsible sections that you can expand and collapse as you need. Okay, so it takes this big giant briefing and kind of makes it into smaller chunks and makes it a little bit easier to consume and understand. There's also a really cool thing we saw when we were looking at the information coming back from Leidos, and there are sections in the NOTAMs. There are certain NOTAMs that will be tagged as critical and or caution. Okay, so we were able to actually build around that and say, well, if the FAA is labeling these as a critical NOTAM, let's put them in their own section. Okay, so if we see hundreds and hundreds of NOTAMs sometimes, depending on how long our route is, it would be really great to move these critical ones into their own bucket, so to speak, so we can kind of look at them outside of all the other NOTAMs that we still should be looking at, but nonetheless. So support for the ICAO plan format. Now we know that the FAA is going to be switching over to only accepting the ICAO format. You can file with ICAO today using the AOPA Flight Planner. We know there's going to be some changes coming on the back end from Leidos and from CSRA. So we'll probably have to make some tweaks as we go forward into early next year. Don't have a timeline for that. I know they've talked early in January sometime, starting to get into a testing period with all of their vendors. That's Harris, Leidos, and CSRA. How long that takes, if there's any back and forth, any adjustments need to be made. But we can expect probably sometime Q1 to make that switch over. Again, there's not a final date yet picked, but it's, they are getting closer. Okay, so the ICAO equipment code calculator, that's something unique we've built into the flight planner. That has been one of the things that we get a lot of calls into the Pilot Information Center, people wanting to know, I'm trying to file an ICAO flight plan, but it wants my ICAO equipment code and surveillance equipment and emergency equipment, and where do I get this, and how do I figure out what this code is? We've built in a little calculator to simplify that, and you can use in itself, you could use the AOPA Flight Planner and use this equipment code calculator, even if you don't use the AOPA Flight Planner. The code it's going to generate, you can use in other devices. So if you wanted to copy that code that we provide and use that in ForeFlight or WingX or anything else that can file in a ICAO format plan, you can do so. It's the same exact code. We just try to make it a little bit easier. So now let's take a look at that one. We'll hop back into the Flight Planner here. And let me just go ahead and shut off this so we can avoid some clutter. So we have the same route. This is going now from, again, Frederick, Maryland to Oshkosh, and we'll go ahead and do a briefing on the whole route. So if we go to route, you can also go down here to brief. We'll just go up here to route, briefings and flight plans. And this is kind of the traditional menu that opens up that allows us to do a new briefing, new FAA flight plan, an ICAO flight plan, and a recent flight plan. Actually, before we get into this, I do want to show the, let me close this, and I said we'll do the ICAO equipment code first. So I'm going to go up to Tool, go to Aircraft Info, and we're going to pull up a sample aircraft here. We'll pull up a Piper Archer. So this is one of my saved aircraft I have in my profile. And we can see that this is sort of the traditional form that we've always had in the AOPA Flight Planner. The only addition for ICAO that we've had to add to this form was the wake turbulence category. So yours may be blank, but there's only two. Most of us are going to fall into the light category that's below 15,500 pounds, or medium and heavy. So light, that is a required field. You do have to have that filled in. But now as we get into the ICAO side of things, we're going to be dealing with this equipment tab and the emergency tab. These are the two that you'll need to fill out for to create your ICAO equipment code. So let's look at the equipment first. Now you can see mine's already filled out a little bit, but basically what this allows you to do is, here's your FAA equipment code. This is kind of the traditional. If you're going to file a domestic flight plan, you do need to have the FAA equipment code filled out. Now this is the one we are very familiar with, like a slant G or a slant U, the one we've always used. That's where you would put this in here. Now this will go away once ICAO is the only accepted flight plan format. This FAA equipment code field will go away. The only real reason we're keeping that now is because you can still use a domestic flight plan if you want. So this is what you would need filled out for that. Now you can start to see that we're getting a code down here. Now I'm actually going to remove that code just to start over. This is where we're going to generate this ICAO equipment code. If you know what your code is, you could manually type this in here, okay? I don't know what it is, so I'm going to use the calculator to build that code for me. So down in this little block here, this is kind of the first part of the calculator, is we can say none. I don't have any equipment. I'm flying a non-electrical aircraft, Piper Cub or something like that, and I don't have any equipment. Hit end, you're done. Okay, you can now file a flight plan with a non-electrical aircraft. However, if you don't have that, you have electrical aircraft and you've got equipment on board, now you need to start filling out a couple fields. Now, if you have, many of the legacy fleet out there fall into this standard category of equipment they have. So you have a VHF radio, you have a VOR receiver, and you have an ILS, in your VOR that you can fly a precision approach. If you have that base equipment and you don't have anything else, you don't have a GPS and you don't have ADS-B out or any of that, you could simply click the S code. And now that filled in for us in each one of these three fields. I now have my VHF radio, my VOR, and my ILS for approach. So I've got COM, NAV, and approach all filled out, okay? If you have other than that, you can start to build the code. So let's go into the comms and take a look. In here, you can select any that apply, any of these. So if you have any of the other type of comm equipment, you can simply add that. Let me add UHF radio just to show you what it'll do. And it'll add that. So now we have a V and a U code, and you can see how this has been added up here. We now have the U code added. And the S, which means standard. So that's where the S came from. If you don't have that, we want to remove it, you click the X and you can simply remove it. The general idea is if you read some of these, an E3 PDC ACARS, if you don't know what that is, you more than likely don't have it. As you can probably tell by looking at this, especially when we're seeing ACARS, we can see that a lot of this equipment code is designed for, for air carriers, large commercial aircraft, the airliners, they're going to have ACARS and things like that. So for the most of us, VHF radio standard equipment is what we're going to be looking for. Okay. Navigation. Let's take a look at this one real quick. I've got DME on mine, so I can enable DME. I've got an IFR approved GPS. So it's a questionnaire. You simply go through here and add all that apply. The ADF was removed from my plane a while ago, so this is basically what I have. Okay. So now I'm actually done with the nav side. I just pick what my equipment can do. Approach. We'll look at that. I've got an ILS. My GPS is IFR approved. It can also fly an LPV approach, so I can actually add that. It is a, it's a Garmin 430 WAS, so I can do LPV. So I add that one. I don't have either of these. I don't have an integrated landing system or an MLS. So now you can see the code that was put up here for us. SDGB with a /. The information behind the / will be filled in the emergency side tab. So everything on the left side of the / is your COM, NAV, and approach equipment codes. Everything on the right side of the / will be your emergency equipment codes. Okay, that's how the code is, that format or structure is broken down. Let's take a look real quick at the emergency side. I've got a portable ELT. I don't have any dinghies. I do have lighted life jackets. So I add these 3 items, go back to my equipment. Actually, let's save that. And cannot be part of empty. The part after the / may not be empty. Oh, this is the beta version. I'm sorry. That's why it is doing that. Actually, we can go down here and do the rest of this. I didn't see that. It should be on the other side. Transponder, mode C. I am not ADSB out yet, so we'll just leave it at mode C. Now you can see that our code is in there, our emergency equipment is filled in. Now we can hit the save button, it'll save it. So that's all there is to actually filling out your ICAO equipment codes. Okay, very straightforward, very simple to do. So now that we have our aircraft set for ICAO, we can go and do our briefing and filing. We could actually file an ICAO flight plan. But what we're going to look here is this next gen briefing. So this is that preview into what is coming. Okay. So I'm going to pick Leidos Flight Service, and we're going to submit this request. Now, I just will tell you, we are working on a canned briefing for development purposes, so this is not a live briefing. If you're looking at some of the dates on here and seeing, geez, why don't these line up with what today's date is? This is a canned briefing that we've loaded into our system, and this is what we are using to development against. It did come from Leidos. It was a real briefing for this flight, but it was just done a few days ago. So let me make this window a little bit bigger, and we'll start to actually see what this looks like. So you can see over here on the left is all of our different categories. These are all the different sections of the briefing. We also up here will show you, here is the route you're briefing, and there are 44 unread sections. So in this briefing, there are 44 different sections we have not looked at yet. And we indicate those with a little blue dot. Now, again, this is pre-beta, this is early development. Some of this may change, so don't take all this to bank. We might change this, but even on feedback we get from you guys, we may end up changing a little bit of this to make things easier. But this is where we're at as of today. You can see that it opens up the adverse conditions. We can look at individual TFRs. And you can see around the DC area where we're located right now, a very cold DC area right now. We can see we've got the CSRA. So just by hovering over this chart, we can get information about that TFR that is here. We can also see that we have an active time that is published for that TFR. This is permanent. And we'll also get, for most TFRs, we'll actually get a passing time. So this will actually tell us, based on our route and our performance of our aircraft and winds aloft and all those great factors, when are we going to be passing? And if you look up top here in this red section, the TFR is active while our flight is going to be traversing the area. So that tells us that it is in effect. You can look at some other briefings. We were looking at one yesterday where it said, this was like in a yellow color up there, and it said the TFR is going to be active 60 minutes after your proposed passing time. So it'll tell you if you need to be concerned about delaying or when that TFR is going to be. So let's look at a couple other ones real quick here. These are a TFR section. If you see any sections that are grayed out and they don't have any numbers behind them, like this one has 3, there's nothing in that briefing. You don't even need to bother looking at that part of the briefing. There's no information provided to us in that briefing. If we look at AirMets, you'll now be able to look at a graphical representation of an AirMet. So here's AirMet Sierra, okay? And it tells us that it is going to be active when we're traversing the area. And you can see where our route is going to penetrate this AirMet. Okay, so this is an AirMet. Here's all the information about that. This is IFR conditions, okay, are predicted for that area based on our crossing time. We won't go through all these. I know we're getting a little tight on time, and I want to get to some questions here. So AirMet for icing, so you can see the different ones. And all you have to do is hover over those, and you can see how it highlights the actual corresponding details section below it. If I click on one of these, it will then zoom in, and we're just looking at that AirMet. We can again see that, yes, this is going to be active when we're going into it. We're just going to be touching the edge of that AirMet Zulu there, and you can see the passing time when we're predicted to pass through there. Let's jump down to like the NOTAM section here. You kind of get the idea how this is all going to work. The NOTAMs will allow us to actually, you can see a lot of these are grayed out. We don't even need to look at them. Here's obstructions. There's one obstruction within 10 miles of our departure, okay? And we can see that it's probably an unlit tower, antenna light or something out. But let me get down to the en route. This is a good demonstration. And we'll look at the runway, taxiway, and apron. Okay, now let me actually make this bigger and show you. For this route, there's 76 NOTAMs issued for runways, taxiways, and aprons. Now we know 76, well, they're not all going to be right along my route. The thing with a briefing is you get this corridor concept, okay? So one of the things now we can look at with this graphical style briefing is you can see the chart, and we actually cluster all these different 76 different NOTAMs into groups. So maybe we would say, let's go in and look at these 7 in this area. All that I have to do is click on the chart, open that up, and now it'll zoom in on those airports that made up those 7 different. If there are multiples, they will tell you with a little badge. So at KDPA, there are 3 NOTAMs. There's 1 at KICS, 2 at KLOT, and 1 at KARR. If you want to look at any individual, you can see just by hovering over them, the list below automatically scrolls to just show me those 2, and it highlights those to make it very easy. I'm not clicking, all that I'm doing is moving my mouse around. If you want to look at just this one, you can certainly click on that airport. It filters out all the other ones, so now all that I'm looking at is that NOTAM, okay? This method of a graphical style briefing makes it very easy to navigate through this briefing, and it's a lot easier to visualize where these are along your route or in relationship to your route than simply looking at a big long text file and trying to figure out, well, I don't know where KDPA is. How do I know if I should be concerned with that? This allows you to put it onto a chart and see that, oh, well, geez, that's not too far off my route. Maybe I do want to take a look at that one. So the idea behind a graphical briefing in a more organized briefing like this is that you can get in there and find the information you want without getting lost in just thousands and thousands and thousands of words. Okay, so again, this is early development. It does not exist in the product yet. We do expect to have this out sometime Q1, certainly before Sun and Fun. We'll be able to show this and you'll be able to use this briefing. So again, we'd love to get your feedback on this. You can post something in the comments. You can respond to the survey when that shows up in the next day or 2. We'd love to get information on what you think. And we are going to show one thing before we conclude is I do want to show, we might run just about 2 minutes late here, but let's hop back to the presentation real quick. And we will talk a little bit about how you can get more involved with the AOPA Flight Planner, okay? I think we want to take that one off. Yeah. So we have, if you go to aopa.org/flight planning/feedback, that will take you to our tool powered by User Echo, which allows you to submit ideas, vote for other people's ideas that they have for the flight planner, and submit different questions and things like that. We monitor this very closely. And if you actually went there, I was going to show this, but we're running a little short on time, but you can go and take a look at it, and you'll see all the top features. And we actually update that with a status of where it's at in development. Are we planning it? Is it started? Is it completed? So you'll see a little color-coded tags there that tell you of all these different features that have been requested by users, and our members, where we are at. We listen to this stuff very closely. Okay, so go to that if you want to write that, jot that down, you can get to that. You can also get to this from the feedback button within the AOPA Flight Planner, so you don't have to write this down. You can get to this same place in the Flight Planner. Okay, a little bit about this open beta program, and then we'll wind it up with some questions. Coming soon, early 2017, we are going to have access to our beta version of the Flight Planner. So this is going to be open to all members. In the past, we have done sort of an invite only or sort of a resume kind of thing where we wanted to have a smaller group of people. It was just a little bit easier to manage. We're going to do away with that, and we are now going to allow all members, active AOPA members, to access the beta version of our flight planner. You'll have the first glimpse at the stuff we're working on, keeping in mind that things are beta. They may not fully work, but that's the idea. We put them out in beta before we release it to production. You will also have a dedicated forum in User Echo, our feedback tool, that's going to allow you to interact with us as well as other users of the beta. So other members in there, you can have conversations, you can talk about, hey, this is really great, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? So we really want you to be involved in this and help us build this product out that we all use. So again, expect all of that coming in early, first quarter of 2017. So do we have any questions? We have a few questions here. So let's go to the webcam there. We'll switch over to that. Okay, so first question, does the flight planner show MOAs and if they are hot or not? Good question. Currently, no. Actually, MOAs are on there. You'll be able to see them, and you can do a get info on them, which you can get information about that. But that is something that we are looking at, and it's something that we want to build in, and you'll probably see that possibly with the briefing. We'll be able to extract that, and we're going to be able to build some overlays on that. But that is something we are absolutely looking at. We've had this question before. It's a great question. If that's not already in our User Echo tool, I definitely would recommend somebody put that in there just to remind us. If I don't see it and I remember tomorrow, I'll put that in there too. That's a really good one. We should be really easy to be able to tell you that if you're going to penetrate an MOA. If there's any other ones come in. So it doesn't look like we have any other ones right now. Hopefully we've answered everything for you tonight. We want to thank you for joining us here on YouTube. Remember that subscribe button. It's very important for us. It allows you to, it just allows us to kind of build our YouTube presence, but it also allows you, as we go out live with different events, some of them may not be scheduled until last minute, so this will give you an early warning. You'll get a pop-up on your phone, your device, letting you know when we're live. You can tune in as you have time. So other than that, there are going to be more. This is the last live stream of this year, and we are going to have many more coming next year. That list is being developed as we speak. They will be published out there. They will probably be here right here on YouTube. We hope this worked out for you good. We want to thank you for being here tonight. From everyone here at AOPA, we want to wish you happy holidays, happy and safe holidays, and we will see you back here in 2017.